teachings and commands to Israel was to make them a peaceful and healthy nation. In their pursuit of righteousness, they were to recognize the dignity of all human beings, and they were to see that justice was accessible to everyone. They were to lift the yoke of the oppressed and meet the needs of the less fortunate and the alien. Acts of kindness were to be performed in such a way that the recipient felt no shame. So we have had people say before, what is the purpose of the Torah? What is the purpose of God's teachings and instructions, His directives and commands? Well, the reason why God gave His Torah, His teachings and instructions, directives and commands to Israel, and through Israel to the nations of the world, His reason for giving these teachings and instructions, directives and commands to Israel was to let them know that they serve a God unlike the gods of the nations around them. That they serve a God who is holy, righteous, and just. And because He is holy, righteous, and just, to approach Him, to have a relationship with Him, they must walk in paths of righteousness. And again, these teachings, these instructions, these directives and commands are to show them that their God is holy, and that it will reveal His character and show them how they are to walk before Him, to walk in righteousness, walk uprightly before Him. Now again, in their pursuit of righteousness, they were to recognize the dignity of all human beings. And we see this throughout the Torah, but you're going to see this brought out in Deuteronomy chapters 23 through 25. There are these directives and these commands that are given to the people, and that again, the people understand that we are all made in the image of God. And if we are made in the image of God, then we are to recognize the dignity of each human being. And that again, these directives, these commands will help them to live in peace with one another. So that again, by doing what is right one to another, we can live in peace with one another. One of these directives is that they are to help those who are poor. If someone is poor and that they come to their fellow citizen and they say to them, I am poor, can you help me? If that person has the means to help them with money or to meet that need, they are to do so. They are not to turn them away. Another thing is to feed the hungry. They are commanded to feed the hungry. If someone comes to them with that need and that person can give them food or give them money to purchase food, they are to do so. Another thing is that if someone is running a business or they are someone who is over a business, like your manager or whatever, they are told that they are to see to it that they pay their workers a fair wage for a fair day's work, and also to pay them at the end of each day. God says that if you do not give them a fair day's wage, or you do not pay them, and they go hungry, and they cry out to me for help, I will hear, and I will punish you for not meeting that need and not fulfilling that obligation. Another thing is that they are to see that justice is carried out without recognizing the individuals who come before them. Justice was not only for the native-born Israelite, but it was also for the stranger. The stranger there meaning one from the nations. Let's just think of Ruth when we say this. It is a person from one of the nations who has come to recognize Yudhe-Vave, the one true God, that He is God. And they have rejected their false gods, rejected their paganism. They've come, and their desire is to worship God and live among His people. So the native-born and the stranger, also the poor and the wealthy, were to receive justice when they went before the magistrate or the magistrates, that they were to hear the case, the terms of the case, and then render a fair and impartial decision. Now, again, what we see here is that the people were to look out for one another, especially the poor, the widow, and the orphan, and the stranger, to see that their needs are met. And acts of kindness were to be given in such a way that the person who received it did not feel any shame. We find one such case of how to help someone here in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 19 through 21. When someone was hungry, that they were allowed to go out in the fields of a farmer. God says that the farmers, they could harvest, but not to the edges of their fields. And if they dropped a sheaf, that they were not to go back and pick it up, but they were to let, those sheaves that are dropped or those corners of the field, they were to allow the poor, the widow, the orphan, the stranger come in and gather them so that they may eat and be satisfied. Again, the people were to have their needs met without feeling shame. Now, Yeshua addresses this in Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. And that he says that when you give to help someone, when you show kindness to somebody, be sure and do it in secret. Now, they had back at his time where there were people that would flaunt their good works. They would go out and shout out to somebody, I'm about to help this guy over here, drawing attention to what they're doing. Some even blew a shofar. They would blow a shofar and then say, I'm going to help out this person. What they're doing is that they're drawing attention, and he says all you're doing is seeking the applause of men, and so that's all you're going to get. Your Father in heaven will take no notice of it. When you give charity, you are to give it in secret, and he will see, and he will bless you for your kindness. Now, the sages say that God fed the hungry, clothed the naked, and buried the dead. So let's see if the sages are correct. We know that God did feed the hungry. You say, where is that? It is in Shemot or Exodus chapter 16. The children of Israel come out of Egypt. They're in the wilderness. There's very little, if any, food to eat. They cry out to God. And God answers them by giving them manna, food from heaven. Then they ask for meat, and God gives them quail to eat. So throughout their time in the wilderness, God fed his people. Then the sages say that he clothed the naked. We find this in Bereshit or Genesis chapter 3, verse 21. We know that Adam and Eve, that they sinned against God, their eyes were open, they recognized they were naked, and they tried everything to cover their nakedness. And everything they did was to no purpose. And it says that God produced clothes for them so that they could cover their nakedness. Then we are told that he buried the dead. Someone will say, where did he bury the dead? It is found in Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 6. When Moses dies, it says God buried him, and to this day we do not know where Moses is buried. Now, Yeshua obediently did what he saw his Father doing, which was feeding the hungry, healing the sick, and releasing those in captivity to sin and demonic possession. So, we see that God the Father is working, and he is feeding the hungry, he's clothing the naked, he is burying the dead, he is meeting the needs of mankind. And Yeshua says he can only do what he sees his Father doing. So again, we are told that he is feeding the hungry. Where do we see this? We see it in several places, but I'm just going to give you one, and that is found in Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 through 21. He's teaching a large crowd. He recognizes that they're hungry, and that he produces a miracle, and in this, these people are fed. Now it says he fed 5,000. That's 5,000 men. That's not including the women and children. It could have been 15 to 20,000 people that he fed with this miracle. Then we know that he healed the sick. There are numerous passages, But I'm going to give you two of them. One we find in Mark chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. We know that there is this man with a withered hand. He approaches Yeshua. It is the Sabbath day. And we know that the feelings of the religious leaders is that nobody could be treated for an illness or something unless they were about to die. They had to wait till the Sabbath day was over. This man, he approaches Yeshua on the Sabbath day, and Yeshua tells him, stick out your hand. And when he sticks out his hand, that Yeshua healed him and made him whole. Then another case we find in Yohanan or John chapter 5, verses 2 through 9. Now Yeshua is at the temple area, and that there is the pool of Bethesda. And that there is a man that has been there. He's been in this condition for 38 years. And that there is this understanding that the angel would come and stir the water, and the first person in would be healed. That this man has been there for a very long time seeking healing. Yeshua comes to him and says, do you want to be healed? And so what he does is that he tells the man, pick up your mat and go on your way. You are healed. Now, another case is that he is healing those in captivity to sin and demonic possession. I'll give you a couple of passages. One is Luke chapter 4, verses 33 through 35. There is a demoniac, and that Yeshua is there, and this demon knows who Yeshua is and is speaking through the man. He says, there is Yeshua. He is the Messiah. He's the Son of the living God. And Yeshua says, be quiet and come out. Then we learn from Luke chapter 8, verses 26 through 27, that Yeshua and his Talmudim disciples are at Gadara, and there is a demon-possessed man who is wandering about among the tombs. And that he comes to Yeshua, and Yeshua asks him his name, and this voice comes out of the man and says, Legion. This man has a legion of demons, and Yeshua calls them out, casts them out, and the man is made whole. And again, one other thing we need to know is that he has the power also to raise the dead. We have passages for that as well. We know that he was able to raise the daughter of Yair. He was able to raise her from the dead. We also know that he was able to raise the son of the widow of Nain. And lastly, that he was able to raise Eleazar or Lazarus. So again, in all these things, he is following the example of his Father. The Father is working, and he did the same. Now, out of love for our Creator and his Son, we are to follow their example. God the Father is working. Yeshua is working. And we are to follow their example. All of us as gifts and talents. And we are to use those to meet the needs of others. Going on. The children of Israel were to make their military encampment and streets as clean of human waste as possible, and that which spreads disease. And someone went to relieve themselves. It was done outside the camp. They were to dig a hole, relieve themselves, and then cover it up. Old food was to be burned. So we said that God wants his people to live in peace one with another, but also to live healthy. And here we get this example in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 9 through 15. Now he's speaking here of two different areas. One is the military encampment. One is in the cities and towns of the nation. He says that when someone needs to relieve themselves, they're to go outside the camp, dig a hole, relieve themselves, cover it up with dirt. And if there is old food, not to throw it outside, but to burn it up. There is a reason for this, because if we do not properly dispose of waste, if we do not properly dispose of old food, we're going to have sickness and disease. Case in point, in the Middle Ages, improper disposal of human waste and old food and poor sewage were significant contributors to the spread of the Black Death. Now, many of you know that 11 years ago, I went to Britain on a vacation. I went over to Britain, and on our bus tour, we went to the town of York. And our tour guide was talking about the Middle Ages and how they lived and the reasons for why they had sickness and death. He said that that they had these 2 or 3 story places, where the people lived on 3 levels, 2 or 3 levels. And he said that they wouldn't go out in the night to relieve themselves. They had these chamber pots. So they'd go, and then in the morning they'd raise the window and they'd yell out, "Look out below," or "Watch out for the water or feces or whatever." And then with the window open, they'd throw it out. And it would be in the yard or in the street. Then, when they had old food, they didn't burn it up. They just threw it out in the street. And so what we've got is that we've got flies and, we've got mice and rats and everything else. And we've got sickness and disease. Again, they also didn't have poor sewage. All of these things, as we were told, is that they were major contributors to the spread of the Black Death. Now, the Jewish community, by observing God's commands concerning cleanliness and proper disposal of waste, has fared better and experienced better health than their neighbors. So again, the Jewish community has tended to be healthier than their neighbors. They have been given to properly disposing of human waste, properly disposing of old food, seeing to it that there's a proper sanitation system, and so forth and so on. And that because they followed God's rules of cleanliness, they have fared better than their neighbors. Moving on. The Israelites were commanded to not despise the Egyptian. So we see there in Deuteronomy chapter 7, or 23 verse 7 that is, we see there that God says that His people are not to despise the Egyptian. And there are 4 reasons for why the Israelites were not to despise the Egyptian. We're going to quickly talk about these 4. Number 1, for many years the Israelites were welcomed guests in Egypt. We know the story. We know that Jacob and his sons, they're living in Canaan, but God knows the beginning, the middle from the end, and He knows that there's a famine coming, and so He sees to it that Joseph is sent down to Egypt. And so Joseph goes down there. He starts off a slave, but God works through this, and he is made viceroy, second in command in all of Egypt. And that he comes up with this idea, that this famine is coming, and so he comes up with a way to save food and store it up for the time when this famine is coming. And that because of these actions, the Egyptians, the people living in Canaan, and the surrounding peoples, their lives are spared. So when Yaakov or Jacob and his sons come to live in Egypt, they are a welcomed people. Now, in Egypt, the Israelite nation was born. Through their distrust and disdain for foreigners, Egypt allowed the Israelites to be incubated, thus growing from 70 in number into a great nation. Now, I believe, and I'm sure there are some of you that have read the story of Israel, and believe like I do, that if they would have remained in Canaan, they would have assimilated and disappeared from the pages of history. We see it that ones like Judah, he married a Canaanite woman, and this one was engaged in this, they're engaged in this sin, and disobedience to the Lord. Cavorting with these people of Canaan. God sends them down to Egypt. Now the Egyptians, again, they had a distrust and a disdain for all foreigners. When the people of Egypt learned that they are Israelites, they don't want anything to do with them. So they lived in Goshen, and they're basically in a cocoon, or they're incubated. And because the Egyptians will not intermarry them or have anything to do with them, they stay within themselves, and they grow into a great nation. They went down to Egypt, 70 in number. And when they came out, they had 603,000 fighting men, and that didn't include the women and children. They say that there was as many as 2 or 2.5 million people that came out of Egypt. Now, thirdly, fear, not anti-Semitism, was the driving force behind their oppression and slavery. The Egyptian king came to fear the Israelites, believing that with a sizable population, they may make war with Egypt and take control of the land. So we see that the reason why they were oppressed and put into slavery was not anti-Semitism, but it was because of fear. We learn this from Shemot or Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 through 10. We see there that it says that there was an Egyptian Pharaoh who knew not Joseph and all that he had done. And so he looks out and he sees that the Israelites are growing in number, and he is terrified. He says, if we don't do something about these people, they'll join in with our enemies and attack us, or they will grow to such numbers that they will take over the land. And they had a reason to fear because they had dealt with the Hyksos. The Hyksos had warred against Egypt and overran them. And then in the meantime, the Egyptians were able to run them off and restore sovereignty over the land. So they're afraid of the Israelites because they're foreigners, and they don't want a repeat performance that they had with the Hyksos. Number 4, the Israelites had been properly compensated for their years of suffering and enslavement when they carried off the wealth of Egypt, freely given them by the people of the land. So again, the 4th reason is that they were properly compensated for their years of suffering and enslavement. We learn this from Shemot or Exodus chapter 12, verse 36. God had said to the people, he had said to Moses to tell the people, at the moment of your freedom, you are to go to your Egyptian neighbors and you are to ask them for gold, silver, bronze, precious linens and garments and the like. And so at the moment of their freedom, they did so, and God gave them favor with the Egyptians. And everything they asked for, the Egyptians gave them, and the Israelites carried off the wealth of Egypt. Yet they would remember Amalek and see to it that the people and the name of Amalek were utterly blotted out from under heaven. The Amalekites had no just cause against Israel other than pure hatred. They attacked the rear of those who traveled, cutting off the weak and the defenseless. Where God had said, do not have a hatred for the Egyptian, he says here in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 17 through 19, that they were to remember Amalek and war against them, to remove the name of Amalek and the people from under heaven. Now, why is he so angry? Because Amalek had no reason to do what they did. Israel had no relations with Amalek. They had done nothing to Amalek. They had no just cause. The only thing is that the Amalekites had a pure hatred for the people of Israel. And when they attacked the rear. Who is generally in the rear? The old, the infirmed, the weak children, those who are defenseless, and they cut them off, and God is incensed. He is furious. And he tells Moses to tell the people to remember Amalek, war against them, until the name of Amalek and the people are cut off from under heaven. When Saul did not fulfill his commission, David fought against Amalek. Hezekiah made war against them, and scholars say this conflict ended with the death of Haman and his sons. So, we know the story. We know from 1 Samuel, chapter 15, verses 7 through 9, that God had commissioned Saul, go and make war on Amalek and remove the name of Amalek and its inhabitants from under heaven. But Saul was not committed to it. And what Saul did was that he attacked a few villages and wiped them out, but he let the rest of them live. We know because in 1 Samuel chapter 30, while David and his men were out, fighting and so forth and so on, that the Amalekites attacked Ziklag, where his family and their families and their livestock were, and they attacked Ziklag and they carried them off. David and his men went after them, and they attacked the Amalekites and retrieved their wives, their children, and their livestock. We also learn that they are fighting them in the days of King Hezekiah. We find this in 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 43, where it says that Hezekiah and the people warred against Amalek. We see that they are still fighting them in the days of Esther, in the form of Haman and his sons. And that we learn from the book of Esther that God raises up Esther and her uncle Mordecai. They are offspring of the family of Saul. They are Benjamin and the family of Saul. And God raises them up. And it is through the intercession of Esther and Mordecai that they are able to cause the king to defend their people. But then we see that Haman is hanged on the gallows that he had raised up for Mordecai. And then we see that in chapter 9, verse 14, that the sons of Haman were also hanged as well. So again, the scholars say that with the death of Haman and his sons, that this is the end of the war with Amalek. Now, I got two more points and we'll close. Firstly, Israel was to gauge in Tikkun Olam, repairing or restoring the world. We do this through service and giving what we have to meet the needs of others. Followers of Yeshua are to use their gifts and talents to comfort and meet the needs of others. So we learned that the children of Israel were given the command to do Tikkun Olam, which is to repair or restore the world. That they were to go out and they were to declare the name of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the one true God, and that they were also to make His Torah, His teachings, instructions, directives, and commands known to the peoples of the world, so that they would learn of their Creator, learn of His righteous standards, turn away from their pagan gods and pagan ways, embrace their Creator, and walk uprightly before Him. And that if we are followers of Yeshua, those from the nations, you are grafted into Israel, and you have been given the responsibility of doing Tikkun Olam as well. All believers in Yeshua have gifts and talents. Use them for the glory of God and meeting the needs of others. If you can teach, teach. If you have the ability to teach children and encourage them, do that. If you have empathy for the sick, then go to them, sit with them, read scripture, pray with them, and encourage them. Or if you have empathy for the poor, go and buy them groceries or help them to purchase groceries. Use whatever gifts and talents you have to meet those needs. The second point I want to make is that the time is coming when believers will face trial and tribulation. Like Aaron and Hur, we are to come alongside those engaged in spiritual battle. Through mutual support and our eyes firmly set upon the Lord, the believer will be delivered. Then Amalek that wars against our souls and the adversary who seeks our destruction shall be utterly defeated and destroyed. So again, the second point is, and I'm going to keep saying this week in and week out, because of the fact we need to be prepared, that we see very clearly that darkness is gathering around us, that trial and tribulation is on its way. And that we must personally be prepared, but also come alongside and encourage one another for this time. So again, we need to be like Aaron and Hur. If you don't know the story, that when Amalek attacked, that, when this war came, and Moses was up on the hillside with his hands raised to God, and his eyes are lifted up, looking to God for deliverance and victory over Amalek. And that he did so until his arms got tired. As long as his hands were raised and his eyes lifted up to God, that they had the victory. But when he got tired and his hands began to lower, Amalek began to gain the advantage. So we have where Aaron and Hur came alongside. Aaron on one side, Hur on the other. They lifted his hands and kept them up, and his eyes were lifted up to God. And that God gave His people the victory. And this is what we must do, is come alongside those who are in spiritual battle and offer them support. Now again, we talk about Amalek, and people say, well, Amalek has been destroyed, but there is a spirit of Amalek. The spirit of Amalek seeks the destruction of our flesh and of our souls. And so again, what we are to do is we are to keep our eyes firmly upon God, trusting in the finished work of Yeshua. And when we have family or friends that are in the spiritual battle, come alongside of them, being like Aaron and Hur, and helping them. in this matter, so that in the end, by running the race to completion, we will have victory over Amalek, that which seeks to destroy our flesh and our souls. That we will have access to the New Jerusalem. And there we will live in the presence of our God. God will tabernacle among the redeemed. So, we will live in the presence of our God, walking by the light of the risen Lamb, and we will experience life, joy, and peace for all eternity. And that's the message.